Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona, and this is the March 10th edition of Horses to Watch, where we highlight some horses that might have had adversity in their prior starts and might be worth betting back in the future, or some horses that just put forth notable performances on the last week. On this show, we're going to veer more towards the latter group of horses that I think showed some talent during the past week, focusing on some maiden races that took place around the country. Again, none of these horses really necessarily encountered adversity, but I think they all showed some talent in different ways. It might be worth following in their future starts. We're going to begin with a maiden race from last Saturday at Tampa Bay Downs, going 6.5 furlongs. It was on that Tampa Bay Derby undercard. This is the third race of the day, going 6.5 furlongs for 3-year-old fillies. Let's break them from the gate. We're going to focus on the number 2, Laurie, a first-time starter for Chad Brown and Juddmonte Farm. And you see it both on the head-on shot and the pan below. She breaks a little bit slowly, about a length or two behind the field, which is typical for a first-time starter. That's nothing of real concern. But after she breaks slowly, she's going to rush up into the race pretty soon thereafter, and she's going to get up into fourth, about a furlong into the race. And from there, she's going to continue to progress pretty aggressively along the inside. Her rider's not preventing her from doing so. He's letting her find her footing and find her stride on the inside path. And by the time they get to the far turn, she's going to run all the way up inside of the leader to get on terms with that horse before eventually going away from that one at the end. Now you see along the bottom left-hand side of the screen, this horse was 9-5 in the wagering. Perhaps a little bit lukewarm for a Chad first-time starter, especially considering that this was not the toughest field at Tampa Bay Downs, but she was nevertheless pretty impressive in the running of this race. As you see coming around the far turn here, the runner to her outside was getting out a little bit, so she easily dismisses that foe. And once they get into the stretch, she's just a little bit green. She has a little bit of trouble changing leads awkwardly at the top of the lane, but once she switches over to her right lead, she just goes away from this field under wraps. If you read the chart of this race, the chart caller says this was a ridden out effort. I don't quite see this. There's no riding going on at the end of this race. She is just going away from this field under absolutely no encouragement from the rider. Again, there's not a whole lot of quality behind her in this race, but I rarely say horses could have run a lot faster if they've been asked. Perhaps this one could have, because she was asked for nothing in the final eighth of a mile of this race. And there is pedigree for this one to do better with added experience and added distance, and potentially even a surface switch in the future. She's by Uncle Mo, who's a very versatile sire. The Dam was a grade 1 place turf router in Europe. She also ran some races over in the US. And the Dam herself is a half-sister to Midships, who was grade 1 winning turf router in the United States, going 1.25 miles. So there's a lot of pedigree to go longer and a lot of pedigree for turf with this filly. So she's one that I would be interested to see how she progresses and how Chad Brown chooses spots for her in the future. Moving on to another maiden race from Sunday. This one is at Aqueduct. It was the last race on their card, March 7th. Race 8, this was a New York bred maiden special weight going 6 furlongs. Let's break these horses from the gate, and I want to focus on the number 7, Sinful Dancer, breaking toward the outside, and he's going to break a little bit slowly in this race in that green cap there, the chestnut towards the back of the pack, but also gets squeezed back right after the break, and that's going to put him about 2 lengths or 3 lengths behind that first flank of horses, and he's going to, after that, separate himself from those other horses who broke slowly and try to regain that lost position as they move down the backstretch, but he's trying to move up on this field while going wide, and he's going to have to continue to lose ground going wide into the far turn. The eventual winner of this race was another first-time starter, the number 3, Winner's Laugh, but it should be noted that Winner's Laugh, along with almost all of the other horses in this race, were 4-year-olds, whereas Sinful Dancer was a 3-year-old. Now, some people make a lot out of 3-year-olds facing 4-year-olds in March of their season when they've just turned 3 years old. I don't put too much stock in that because they do get a weight break, but I do think it's worth pointing out because Sinful Dancer might have more room for further development than some of these other horses. And you see coming up into the quarter pole here, Sinful Dancer has advanced all the way up to be in 3rd place here, racing 3 to 4 wide around the far turn, and he's going to briefly look like he's going to issue a challenge for Winner's Laugh, the eventual winner, at the 8th pole of this race, but you see him just sort of hanging on his left lead here. He never changes over to his right lead to get that extra burst of energy. That's just a little bit of greenness that you often see from first-time starters, but he nevertheless finishes well, stays on after that leader all the way to the wire, and this was a pretty fast maiden race, even for older horses. Got an 83 buyer for this horse. The winner got an 87 buyer. So these are 2 talented first-time starters. And while the winner of that race, Winner's Laugh, could be one that has a real future sprinting on the dirt, I'm interested to see how George Weaver, the trainer of Sinful Dancer, handles his career moving forward, because Sinful Dancer, kind of like the Chad Brown horse we just talked about, Also has a big turf pedigree. He's by War Dancer, who has proven himself to be really more of a turf sire in New York. And on the dam side, his dam's a half-sister to Fear No Evil, who's a multiple stakes place turf sprinter, as well as Toughest Ombre, who was a high-level allowance performer on both turf and dirt. So given that sire's influence, Sinful Dancer seems like one that could have a real future on the turf if they decide to switch surfaces in the future. So he's one that I think is definitely worth following as they move on to Belmont and potentially more options for where to contest these maiden races in the future. One more maiden race to discuss at Oaklawn Park, also on Sunday, March 7th. This was race 7 on that card, a maiden special weight event going 6 furlongs. Let's break these horses from the gate, and we're going to focus on the rail runner, the number 1, Noble Reflection. This horse breaks very sharply. His rider, Ricardo Santana, gets him right out to the early lead, quickly opening up an advantage on this field. You love to see young horses break like this, show that professionalism out of the gate, and he quickly establishes an easily moving down the backstretch. And it's not like the others are letting him have an easy lead, because he is showing high speed in this race. The opening quarter is going to go up in under 22 seconds. This horse is really moving. Now, he's a second career starter in this race, unlike the other 2 horses we talked about who are first-time starters, but he was coming off the layoff here because his only prior start had come in California, where he had finished 3rd over the summer at Del Mar, and that day he had finished behind Dr. Scheibel, who went on to be a Grade 1 winner, as well as Spielberg, who went on to win the Grade 2 Los Alamitos Futurity and place in some other graded stakes races. So that was a really strong maiden race. And Noble Reflection confirmed the quality that he showed first time out by taking a big step forward in this second start here. You see that some others are trying to issue a challenge at the top of the stretch, but as soon as Ricardo Santana just lightly sets him down at the head of the lane, Noble Reflection again kicks away from this field, showing really easy speed through the lane. Ricardo is never taking out the whip on this horse to hit him. He's just giving him a strong hand ride to the wire before gearing him down late. Just a very visually impressive performance from this horse. And in addition to being visually impressive, it was also very fast against the clock. That final time of 109 and 2, very quick at Oaklawn, and the buyer came back strong, an 89 buyer for this horse. The time formula speed figure was also very high. I think it was 107 or 108. So just a really fast race. And this is a horse that I would be interested to see what he can do going farther in the future. Richard Baltus is a guy that is known for being able to develop horses over time. That's the trainer of this horse, actually the same connections as Idol, who won the Santa Anita Handicap last week. He certainly hit his best stride later in his career now as a 4-year-old. And this horse, Noble Reflection, he's a son of Liam's Map, who can obviously get horses to go longer distances. He's out of a Tisnow mare, who's a half-sister to Cash Out, a graded stakes place dirt router. And the Dam is a half-sister to Clear Mandate, who you might remember in the late 90s was a Grade 1 winning dirt router. So there's a ton of route pedigree in this horse's bottom side of the female family. So I'd be interested to see where they decide to go with this horse in the future, because he has so much speed. But if they can rein it in, this could be a horse that you see in some longer route races against Stakes Company in the coming months. So those are all the horses to watch for this week. Remember, if you want to follow any of these horses moving forward, you can add them to your DRF Horse Watch on DRF.com. You can get watch mail when these horses run back to your email, updates when they're entered, have workouts, or when they have results in the future. That's how I like to follow these horses. So that's Horse Watch on DRF.com. Thanks for tuning in to Horses to Watch this week, and make sure to stay tuned for future episodes on Wednesdays.